The church doors opened and every head turned. A bride stepped inside, her veil pulled so low it covered her entire face, hanging heavy like a funeral shroud. The music played, but something felt wrong. The guests whispered. The groom's hands trembled. And in that moment, everyone knew they were about to witness something they would never forget. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, please like, comment, and share, and click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is a story about love, control, and the terrifying lengths some people will go to keep the ones they claim to love. It happened in a quiet town in Ohio, where a young man named Daniel was about to marry the woman of his dreams, or so everyone thought. What unfolded that day would shake an entire community and force everyone to ask a question most of us never want to face. What happens when the person who's supposed to protect you becomes the person you need protection from? This isn't a horror story. It's something far more disturbing because it's real. It's about a mother's love that crossed every boundary until it became something unrecognizable. And it started long before that wedding day. Daniel was 28 years old, soft-spoken, and kind in a way that made people trust him instantly. He worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, lived in a modest apartment near his childhood home, and had always been what everyone called a good son. His father had passed away when Daniel was 12, leaving him alone with his mother, Margaret. From that day forward, Margaret made it clear that Daniel was all she had left. She cooked his meals even after he moved out. She called him every morning and every night. She knew his schedule better than he did. And for years, Daniel thought this was normal. He thought this was love. Margaret was a retired school teacher, precise and particular, with a voice that could cut through a crowded room. She had raised Daniel with strict rules: no sleepovers as a child, no late nights as a teenager, no serious girlfriends as a young adult. She told him it was because the world was dangerous, because people would take advantage of his kindness, because no one would ever care for him the way she did. And Daniel believed her, until he met Lydia. Lydia was everything Margaret wasn't. She was calm where Margaret was controlling. She listened where Margaret lectured. She encouraged Daniel to try new things, to travel, to imagine a life that didn't revolve around obligation and guilt. They met at a community art class, of all places. Daniel had signed up on a whim, something he never would have done if his mother had known. Lydia sat next to him, laughed at his terrible painting of a sunset, and then helped him fix it without making him feel small. That was the moment Daniel realized what he had been missing his entire life: someone who saw him as capable, not fragile. Their relationship grew slowly, carefully. Lydia knew about Margaret. Daniel had warned her early on that his mother was protective, that she might not react well. Lydia said she understood. She was patient. She never pushed Daniel to choose between them. She just let him see, day by day, that love didn't have to come with conditions. After 2 years together, Daniel finally gathered the courage to propose. Lydia said yes, tears streaming down her face. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt like he was building something that was truly his. But the moment Daniel told his mother about the engagement, everything changed. Margaret's face went pale. She didn't congratulate him. She didn't hug him. She just stared at the ring in Lydia's photo on his phone and said, "You barely know her." Daniel tried to explain that they had been together for 2 years, that Lydia made him happy, that he loved her. Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. "You think you love her, but you don't know what love is. I'm the one who's been there your whole life. I'm the one who sacrificed everything for you." The conversation ended with Daniel leaving his mother's house feeling sick to his stomach, unsure if he had done something wrong or finally done something right. Over the next few months, Margaret's behavior escalated in ways Daniel couldn't ignore. She showed up uninvited to the venue where they were planning to have the reception and told the coordinator that the date needed to be changed because it conflicted with a family event that didn't exist. She called Lydia's workplace pretending to be a concerned relative, asking invasive questions about Lydia's past relationships. She sent Daniel articles about divorce rates and stories about women who had manipulated men into marriage for money. Lydia stayed calm through all of it, but Daniel could see the strain in her eyes. She asked him once, gently, if he was sure he was ready to set boundaries with his mother. Daniel promised her he was. He told Margaret, in the firmest voice he had ever used with her, that she needed to respect his choices. Margaret cried. She apologized. She said she just wanted him to be happy, and Daniel, desperate to believe her, accepted the apology. The wedding was set for a Saturday in June. The ceremony would take place in a small historic church on the edge of town, followed by a reception at a garden venue Lydia had fallen in love with. Everything was planned. The flowers were ordered. The guests had RSVP'd. Lydia's dress hung in her hotel room, a simple but elegant gown she had chosen with her sister. The night before the wedding, Daniel and Lydia stayed in separate rooms at the same hotel, honoring a tradition Lydia's family held. Daniel called her before bed. They talked about how surreal it felt that tomorrow they'd be married, how excited they were, how ready. Lydia laughed and told him to get some sleep. She said she loved him. He said it back. That was the last time Daniel heard her voice before everything fell apart. The next morning, Daniel woke up to a call from Lydia's sister, frantic and confused. Lydia wasn't answering her door. Her phone was off. Her belongings were still in the room, but she was gone. Daniel's heart dropped into his stomach. He threw on clothes and ran to the hotel, his mind spinning with terrible possibilities. Had she changed her mind? Had something happened to her? When he arrived, hotel staff were already searching. Lydia's sister was crying, and standing in the hallway, calm and composed in a way that felt almost unnatural, was Margaret. Margaret told Daniel that Lydia had probably gotten cold feet. She said it happened all the time, that brides panicked and ran, that it was better to find out now than after the marriage. Daniel stared at his mother, his chest tight with panic, and asked her how she could possibly know that. Margaret just shrugged and said she had seen Lydia leaving the hotel early that morning, looking upset. But something about the way she said it made Daniel's skin crawl. He asked her why she had been at the hotel so early. Margaret said she couldn't sleep and wanted to check on him. Daniel asked her why she hadn't mentioned seeing Lydia until now. Margaret's face twitched, just barely, and she said she didn't think it was important. The hotel manager appeared then, looking grim. They had checked the security footage. Lydia had been seen entering a storage room on the ground floor around midnight. She hadn't been seen leaving. Daniel's blood turned to ice. They found her 20 minutes later, locked inside a windowless storage closet. Groggy and disoriented, she had been drugged. A half-empty bottle of sleeping pills was found near the door, and Lydia's memory of the night was fractured and unclear. She remembered someone knocking on her door late at night. She remembered opening it, and then nothing until she woke up in the dark, unable to move, her phone missing. Lydia was rushed to the hospital. Daniel went with her, his mind reeling, unable to process what had happened. The wedding was supposed to start in 2 hours. Guests were already arriving at the church, and the woman he loved was in a hospital bed, pale and shaking, trying to piece together what had been done to her. The police were called. The hotel footage was reviewed again, this time more carefully, and that's when they saw it. Margaret entering the storage room at 12:17 a.m., wearing gloves. Margaret leaving 14 minutes later, carrying a garment bag. Margaret returning to the hotel lobby at 6:43 a.m., her hair disheveled, her expression blank. When the police confronted her, Margaret didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She said, "I did what I had to do." Daniel stood in the hospital hallway, staring at his mother through the glass window of the interrogation room, and felt his entire life collapse. The woman who had raised him, who had claimed every decision she made was out of love, had drugged his fiancée and locked her in a closet on the night before their wedding, and she had done it without hesitation. But that wasn't the end of the story, because while Lydia was trapped in that storage room, Margaret had taken her wedding dress. She had returned to her own home, put on the gown, and made her way to the church. When Daniel didn't show up at the expected time, Margaret told the coordinator that there had been a change of plans, that Lydia was unwell, and that the ceremony needed to proceed anyway for the sake of the guests. The coordinator, confused but pressured by Margaret's insistence, allowed it. Margaret walked down the aisle in Lydia's dress, her face hidden beneath a veil that hung so low no one could see her features. The guests whispered, uncomfortable but unsure what to do. Daniel's best friend, who was supposed to be his best man, tried to stop the ceremony, but Margaret's voice cut through the room like a blade. She told everyone to sit down. She told them that Daniel was on his way. She told them that everything was fine. And for 10 agonizing minutes, she stood at that altar, alone, waiting for her son to arrive and fulfill what she believed was his true destiny, to belong to her and no one else. If you're still watching, drop a comment with "I'm still here" so we know who's riding this case out with us. Daniel arrived at the church just as Margaret lifted the veil herself, revealing her face to the horrified crowd. People gasped. Someone screamed. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, staring at his mother in his fiancée's dress, and felt something inside him break that would never fully heal. Margaret looked at him with tears streaming down her face and said, "I did this for you. I did this because I love you." But Daniel didn't hear love in her voice. He heard desperation. He heard obsession. He heard the sound of a person who had convinced herself that control and love were the same thing. The police arrived minutes later. Margaret was arrested without resistance. She didn't fight. She didn't cry out. She just looked at Daniel one last time and said, "You'll understand one day." Daniel never saw her again. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing at that altar, wearing the dress that was meant for the woman he loved, trying to take her place in a ceremony that was never meant for her. What would you have done if you were Daniel? Could you have forgiven a parent who did something like this? How do you move forward when the person who raised you becomes unrecognizable? Lydia recovered physically within a few days, but the emotional scars took much longer to heal. She told Daniel that she didn't blame him, that she knew he had been a victim of his mother's manipulation just as much as she had been. But she also told him something that changed everything. "I can't marry you until you're free." She didn't mean free from his mother's physical presence. She meant free from the guilt, the fear, the years of conditioning that had taught Daniel to put his mother's needs above his own. Lydia said she loved him, but that love couldn't survive in the shadow of someone else's control. Daniel knew she was right. For the first time in his life, he sought therapy. He started unpacking decades of emotional abuse disguised as care. He learned words like enmeshment, codependency, and narcissistic control. He learned that his mother's behavior wasn't love, it was possession. And he learned that breaking free from it would be the hardest thing he ever did. Margaret was charged with kidnapping, assault, and several other crimes. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by mandatory psychiatric treatment. During her sentencing, she wrote Daniel a letter. He never opened it. Some people asked him if he would ever forgive her. Daniel said he didn't know. Forgiveness felt too big, too complicated. What he did know was that he couldn't let her define the rest of his life. A year and a half later, Daniel and Lydia got married. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and Lydia's family. No church, no big reception, just a quiet exchange of vows in a backyard under string lights with people who genuinely loved them. Lydia wore a different dress, one she chose herself without anyone's input. Daniel cried when he saw her, not because of what the day represented, but because of how far they had both come to get there. They had rebuilt their relationship from the ground up, with honesty, therapy, and the understanding that love required freedom, not control. It wasn't perfect. Daniel still struggled with guilt. There were days he wondered if he could have done something differently, if he had missed signs, if he had failed his mother in some way. But Lydia reminded him, gently and often, that he wasn't responsible for his mother's choices. He was only responsible for his own. And he had chosen to break the cycle. They moved to a different state shortly after the wedding. Daniel changed his phone number. He didn't tell Margaret where they went. Some people called it harsh. Daniel called it survival. This story isn't just about one family. It's about a pattern that exists in homes everywhere, hidden behind closed doors and justified with words like devotion and sacrifice. It's about parents who refuse to let their children grow up, who see independence as betrayal, who would rather destroy their child's happiness than lose their control. And it's about the children who spend years trying to earn love that was never really about them in the first place. If you've ever felt trapped by someone who claimed to love you, If you've ever been told that setting boundaries makes you selfish, if you've ever wondered whether you're the problem in a relationship that leaves you exhausted and confused, this story is for you. You are not responsible for someone else's inability to let you go. You are allowed to choose a life that doesn't revolve around guilt, and you are allowed to walk away from love that hurts you, even if that love comes from family. Daniel and Lydia's story could have ended in tragedy. Instead, it became a testament to the power of choosing yourself, even when that choice feels impossible. What would you have done in Daniel's place? Have you ever experienced a relationship where love felt more like control? Could you walk away from a parent who refused to let you live your own life? If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you seen this kind of control in your own life or in the lives of people you know? How did it end? And if you thought this story was unforgettable, wait until you hear what we have coming next. Subscribe so you never miss a story that stays with you long after it ends. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that are true.